Hello everyone, my name is Ura and I'm the Codeholic. In today's video, we're going to take that PHP MVC framework and we're going to run it using Docker. We're going to create the Dockerfile inside which we're going to use the Apache virtual host file. We're going to also put a Composer installable shell script file. We're going to also provide custom php.ini and custom MySQL config. We're going to create a volume which will be connected to the MySQL so that whenever you drop MySQL container, the data is not lost. And finally, starting and stopping your PHP application will be as easy as just running docker compose up or start and docker compose stop.
He's crazy.
If you don't have Docker installed locally, check my video in which I show you how you can set up a fully working environment on Windows using Docker and WSL. I built this MVC framework about a year ago. If you want to see how I built that, you can check out my 9 videos playlist on my YouTube channel. I think people enjoy it, so just have a look. All right, let's clone this project and Dockerize it. Alright, here's my MVC framework. In the project root directory, I'm going to create Docker folder, and inside the Docker folder, I'm going to create Dockerfile. First, I'm going to grab PHP image with tag 8.1 Apache. Then I'm going to copy virtual host file into the container. We're going to create virtual host file in a few seconds. Next, I'm going to enable rewrite mode. Next, I'm going to install some necessary packages. First of all, I'm going to run apt-get update and then install libzip dev. I'm going to install wget, git, unzip, and I'm going to specify flags -y and no install recommends as well. Next, I'm going to install PHP extensions such as zip and pdo mysql. Then I'm going to copy the Composer installer into the container, and later I'm going to execute that. This install composer.sh file doesn't exist yet, and we're going to create that one as well. Next, I'm going to copy php.ini file into user local etc php inside the container. I'm going to create the php.ini file in a few seconds as well. Next, I'm going to clean up some packages and install Composer. I'm going to run install composer.sh, which we copied inside the container previously, and I'm going to remove that installer because as soon as the Composer is installed, I don't need that installer anymore. Next, I'm going to change the current working directory into var www. Next, I'm going to change the owner of the container document root into www-data. And finally, I'm going to start Apache in foreground. All right, let's save this. And now let's start creating this 000 default conf file. I'm going to go in the Docker folder, and right here, I'm going to create 000 default conf file. This is Apache virtual host configuration file. And I'm going to create virtual host tag with port 80. I'm going to specify right here server admin and document root. The document root will be basically var www public. Next, I'm going to create a directory tag right here on var www, and inside there I'm going to specify a couple of Apache parameters options which is necessary. Okay, I'm going to save that, and now we're going to create install composer.sh file because we're going to copy that into container as well. Okay, inside the Docker, I'm going to create install composer.sh. Let's have a look at the official documentation, how we can install, download, and install Composer. Okay, we need to copy the following lines of code and execute, but we're going to do this using shell right now. And this basically downloads the Composer setup, and down below we have instructions how we can install that. We need to execute using PHP, and we can specify install directory right here as well. Okay, now let's first of all create the proper shell header. Next, I'm going to run php-r to download basically the installer and save it inside the composer setup.php. Next, I'm going to take the signature of that composer setup.php file. Okay, then I'm going to grab using wget the expected signature, what it should be. And right here, I'm going to write a shell script if statement. If the expected signature is different from the actual signature, which comes from the composer setup.php, this means that the installer is corrupted or something bad is going on. And I'm going to write echo, and I'm gonna remove that composer setup. I'm gonna exit with status code 1, okay, which is basically an error. Next, if everything is okay, I'm going to execute PHP composer setup PHP with -- quiet flag, and I'm going to specify right here install directory, and the file name will be composer. And I'm going to save the result into a variable called result, and I'm going to remove the composer setup PHP from here as well, and I'm going to exit with the result status code. Okay, let's go in the Dockerfile, and the next thing we have to do is to create php.ini. I'm going to create php.ini in the same directory, docker. This one is just a PHP configuration file. I'm going to specify right here upload max file size to be 200 megabyte and post max size to be 220 megabyte. This is just for demonstration purposes to show you that we can provide custom php.ini file as well. All right, since we have our Docker file ready with all the necessary dependency files, I'm going to bring up the terminal. Actually, this is the git bash terminal, and I'm going to open Ubuntu WSL terminal, and let's clear up everything, and I'm going to build an image using this Docker file. Let me actually expand this on a full screen. To build an image, I'm going to execute docker build -t, and I'm going to specify the tag name, and I'm going to call this PHP MVC, and we have to specify finally the folder inside which the Docker file exists. I'm going to hit enter. If you're running this very first time, it's going to need some time to basically download that PHP 8.1 Apache image, and it's going to build also certain things. It's going to run apt-get update and install, and because I had run this previously on this machine, it took much less time, but on your machine it would probably take several minutes. Okay, now the image is built. Let's clear up everything. And I'm going to run docker image ls to see all existing images what we have on this host machine. And the only image I have is PHP MVC. Okay, now I'm going to start this image. I'm going to run the image using docker run command. And I'm going to specify the image name right here, which we just built. But I'm going to also specify a couple of parameters. First of all, I'm going to run this in a detached mode. Okay, in the background mode. Next, I'm going to specify right here ports. I'm going to run this on port 8080:80. What does that mean? So I'm going to run this in an inner port will be 80, but the outer port will be 8080. I'm going to give this a container name, and the name will be PHP MVC as well. I'm going to assign a volume as well, and the volume will be current working directory to be mapped into var www inside the container. I'm going to specify --rm flag as well, so whenever container is stopped, it's going to be automatically removed. All right, let's hit enter and have a look. Container was created and started. We can run docker ps to see all running containers, and here's the container which we just launched, and it's running on port 8080. So if we just open browser and type localhost port 8080, we should see our application. But right here we have a couple of errors because we haven't created env file. Let's actually copy env example and call this env. We haven't configured our application to connect to the database yet, so let's leave this as it is right now and reload the page. The next error we see is the vendor autoload file is missing. That happens because we haven't run composer install. If you want to access your container, you need to run docker exec and the container name, in this case PHP MVC, and the command, in this case bash. So I'm going to specify right here flag -it as well to enable interactive mode, and whenever I hit enter, I'm inside the container. I have composer command available right here, and I can run composer install if I want, but I'm going to show you a second way how you can do this. Let's exit right here and clear up everything, and I'm going to run docker exec php MVC and then the command name, in this case composer install. Let's hit enter right here. Okay, it downloaded and installed everything. Now, if we just reload in the browser, we're going to see an error that the application could not connect to the database. Okay, we're going to take care of this. But so far, Apache and PHP is actually running. Before we connect to the database, let's actually open index.php. And right here, I'm going to just write php info. And I want to see if my PHP custom PHP ini file actually starts working. So let's reload the page. Here we have the version. Let's actually search for upload max file size, which is 200 megabytes. So this proves that our PHP ini is actually working. Let me remove this. And now I'm going to create Docker Compose file. Okay, so I'm going to create docker-compose.yml in the project root directory. First of all, I'm going to specify a version name. Next, I'm going to define my services. The first service is application service, and I'm going to specify the build directory. In this case, that's going to be Docker folder. Then I'm going to specify the image name as well. I'm going to give it also ports, and the ports are pretty much in the same pattern we passed using terminal. So this one, the second one, is the inner port inside the Docker network on which Apache will be behind running, and that's going to be the port which will be exposed for the host machine. I'm going to specify volumes right here as well. So basically the current working directory, which will be everything right here, will be mounted into var www. Next, I'm going to specify the DB service. The image will be MySQL with tag 8. I'm going to specify ports as well. The inner port will be 3306 and the outer port which will be exposed will be 3307. And I'm going to specify environment variables right here. I'm going to specify the root password, database, user, and password. Okay, now I can configure my env. Let's open env file, and I have to specify the same parameters I have defined right here. First of all, because the application will run inside the Docker, the host will not be localhost anymore. It's going to be the service name. In this case, the service name is DB, so we want to connect to DB service. The port will be 3306 because the inner port inside which the application will run will be 3306. So that's good. The DB name will be PHP MVC, so we need to change that. The user, well, we can connect using root or using the custom user, new user. In this case, I'm going to specify the new user, username, and the password. I'm going to specify right here PHP MVC, and the password will be PHP MVC as well. So this looks good. Now let's bring up the terminal. First of all, let's have a look at our running containers. So we have this container started. Actually, let's stop this. I'm going to run docker stop, and we can specify the container ID, this one. The first couple of symbols of the container ID is generally enough, or we can specify the container name. In this case, I'm going to specify PHP MVC. Let's hit enter. Well, the container was stopped. If we just type docker ps, we don't see running containers anymore. And now I'm going to start my containers using Docker Compose. Basically, I'm going to bring up all my stack. In this case, I have only two services right here, application and DB, but we can add a couple of more services later, such as Redis or PHP, mail catcher or node for building assets and etc. Okay, so I'm going to run docker compose up. Let's actually first, before I run this, let's actually remove the vendor folder. So if I just try to remove vendor by executing rm-rf vendor, that's not gonna work because the owner of the vendor is probably www.data or someone else. We can just type and have a look. You see, the root is the owner of the vendor because composer install was run inside the containers command, okay? So if you're doing this on WSL, you need to use sudo command, sudo rm-rf vendor, and you have to specify right here your Ubuntu user password. And now, if we just type ls-la, we don't see vendor right here. It was actually removed. Now let's run docker compose up. Let's hit enter. Let's expand this. Okay, it's now downloading the MySQL image. Okay, now let's have a look what happened. So it downloaded the MySQL image right here. Then it built new image with these commands, what we have in the Docker file. Then it started those two containers, and now everything is running. Now let's have a look in the browser. Reload, and now we have this issue because we deleted the vendor, and if we want to execute actually composer install, we need to do in the following way. Either we need to open new terminal and execute inside there, or actually I'm going to stop this using Ctrl and C, and I'm going to start this, but in this case using detached mode, in a background mode. Okay, now my services are ready. If I just type docker ps, I see two containers running, and now inside the app container, I'm going to execute composer install. In this case, I'm going to run docker compose exec, and I have to specify right here the service name, which is described inside the docker-compose.yml. And the service name is app. So inside the app service, I'm going to run composer install. Okay, here it run it and downloaded the vendor folder. And now let's reload in the browser, and I see my application up and running. So let's navigate. Let's actually try to register because we need to connect to the database as well. I fill up the form and hit the submit. And right here, I have an error, base table or view not found. So basically we have not run our migrations. Let's bring up the terminal. I'm going to clear up everything and I'm going to run docker compose exec app. So inside the app, I want to execute the following command: php migrations php. Hit enter, and now migrations will run. So if I just reload in the browser, and now I was successfully registered. If you want to connect to the database and see what users are there, you need to connect on port 3307. Let's have a look in the docker-compose.yml once again. So this is the port on which you need to connect. And you can use the following user and the following password. I'm going to actually connect to the database using MySQL Workbench, which is a free MySQL client, and not only client, it's pretty cool tool. So I'm going to click plus right here, give it a connection name, change the port into 3307, change the username into PHP MVC, and provide password. Hit OK, test connection. A successful MySQL connection was made. Click OK and OK right here. And here's my database. So inside the tables, we have migrations and users. I'm going to right click on users and select 100 or first 1000 rows. And here is my registered user. This shows that we have successfully Dockerized our PHP application. So we are running inside the Apache and on PHP 8.1, and we're also running a MySQL inside the Docker. One additional and important thing, I'm going to specify right here volumes, and I'm going to create mysql-config.cnf file inside the Docker folder, and I'm going to connect that to etc mysql-confd config.cnf file. So using this approach, I'm going to provide custom MySQL configuration if I need for that running container, database running container. Let's actually go inside the Docker folder, and I'm going to create that mysql-config.cnf file. I'm going to provide a client section right here, MySQL and MySQL-D section. Inside the client section, I'm going to specify the default character set to be always UTF-8 and before. In the MySQL section, I'm going to provide the same thing. In the MySQL-D section, I'm going to set the names to be UTF-8 and before on init connect. I'm going to give it a collation server as well and character set server. And finally, I'm going to provide default authentication plugin to be MySQL native password. So using this approach, I have possibility to customize my MySQL container running inside the Docker. And finally, let's go in the Docker Compose, and I'm going to do one more thing. So whenever I stop my containers, the data inside the database container will be lost. So if there is a registered user and you're going to stop the container and remove the container, not stop. So when you stop, it's there, but if you remove the container, it's going to be lost. So I have to provide right here a volume which will be mounted to my host machine so that whenever you remove your container, the data will not be lost. Okay, so down below I'm going to define volumes, which I'm going to give a MySQL data key right here, and then I'm going to map MySQL data to be mapped on var lib mysql. Okay, let's save everything and bring up the terminal, and I'm going to now stop my containers running. Let's actually expand this on the full screen and have a look. Docker ps. So here are my two containers running. Now let's stop. Docker compose stop. Okay, containers are stopped, but they are not removed. So if we just type docker ps, we don't see anything right there. But if we type docker ps-a, we see right here stopped containers. If I just execute docker compose down, it's gonna not only stop the containers, but that's gonna remove. So if I just run docker ps-a, I don't see containers anymore. Now let's execute docker compose up using a -d to run it in detached mode. Okay, it recreated and started our containers. So if we just type docker ps, we see running containers here. But if we now try to have a look in the MySQL Workbench and try to connect, we won't be able to see this user because, well, the container was removed. So if I execute that, so we don't have this users table at all. So if I right click on this and refresh all, we don't have any tables. Now we need to go in the terminal and run docker compose exec up php migrations.php. That's going to apply migrations. Now let's go in the MySQL workbench, refresh all, and we see right here tables created. Now, if I just execute docker compose down, it's going to stop and remove containers, but the data will not be lost. So if I just execute docker compose up again, the containers have been started. And if we just reload in the MySQL workbench, we see that the tables are not lost. Alright, that's it for this video, and thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section if you know other ways how you can Dockerize your PHP application. If you like the video, hit the like button because that really helps the YouTube algorithm, and finally, that helps me to grow. Thanks for watching and see you in the next time.